Walt, a lot of things happened this week. President Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. The non MAGA people headed out to Davos to do their Davos thing. There, Dara Khosrowshahi, CEO Uber, he made some news. We have a new IPO, Autonomy, coming from China, of all places, getting teed up. But most importantly, Trump was back and daddy's home in 4 days. President Trump has said more to the media than President Biden said in 4 days. The good old times are here.
Yes, he has said a lot. Thankfully, he is not back on Twitter. But, Wall Street has to monitor, especially a lot of these early statements, as indications of things that may or may not impact, industries that we cover. One of the things we saw yesterday, the day before, let's call it this week, depending on when the listener reads, he gets up there with Masa, someone I'm very familiar with based on his involvement with Sprint and covering SoftBank, talking about this infrastructure, investing $500 million.
Billion, not million, billion.
500 billion. Well, yeah, well, that's what he says, billion, but maybe it's more like million, because he said similar things with Foxconn, 8 years ago that never came to fruition. And I think even Elon has attacked the amount of dollars that may or may not be funded there, which in itself sparked a big kind of battle on Twitter between Elon and Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI. So, this is the stuff investors have to deal with. It takes a lot of time and he talks a lot more. So sometimes maybe we don't want him to talk a little bit less. That's fine. The question is, Grayson, in all of his things, I think he might be on TV again now, but of all of his comments, have you pulled out anything that relates to autonomy?
Nothing on autonomy yet. Scary comments the president has made around his friendship, and he made it during the inauguration after he went to his parade, his indoor parade, was talked about his friend Sean O'Brien, president of the Teamsters. That's scary. Reading the tea leaves on that, Mr. O'Brien clearly has the ear of President Trump, and that's concerning as we get towards a national framework for autonomous trucks. But the good news is, and the president keeps saying this every day now, I don't have a countdown clock yet or a timer going, but every day he says we're going into the golden age. Mr. President, sir, let's usher in the golden age of autonomy. That's what national framework does. Let's say the golden age.
Things that are going to impact the companies in this space and the listeners, people that work at these companies, is not just going to be probably national framework. I think we can probably break it down into maybe 3 or 4 large categories. You have national framework. You've got kind of the labor versus tech and kind of how that balances out. And then you have, I think, US versus China, again, in terms of restrictions for China coming in and maybe benefits for US companies going out. So let's go one by one and say, why don't you tell us which people in the administration are the ones that we should be listening for, and when, they might say things or do things, maybe doing things is the bigger issue that will impact this industry. So let's start with national framework. Who matters?
Nominee Duffy, Congressman Duffy, who will be the Secretary of Transportation.
Nominee for what?
Secretary of Transportation. So he matters a lot. Bradbury, who's Deputy Secretary, matters a lot. It'll matter who. We do not have an appointment or official readout from the White House yet, who becomes NHTSA administrator. But the big one to watch on that is Duffy, and another key position, which we do not know who's getting the job yet, is who's going to be the chief legal counsel for DOT. Well, that's really going to matter.
Okay, so you named 3 people. So it was head of DOT. Who is going to get appointed for NHTSA? Do we have any idea who that may be, and who we want to see in there versus who we don't want to see in there?
We have speculation of who the front runner is for that role, but I will respect this person's privacy because this person is a friend. But it'd be very good.
Would this nameless person, would it be positive or negative?
Extremely bullish.
Okay, but is there risk that because it's Trump and things happen, people say things to him in the last minute and something happens? Is it still possible? What's the timing, do you think, on when the head of NHTSA would be announced?
By April.
That's by April, but why not sooner? Like, again, if we've talked in past episodes about we can walk and chew gum, hitting the ground running, doing all these things. I'm ready to go, Grayson. Why do we have to wait till April? Is it possible we get something in February and March? I'm not holding you to this, but is it possible we do get something in February or March?
It depends on the circumstances. It relates to this individual's personal circumstances. So it's not a political, it's a person's personal circumstances, which will determine that factor. And then it depends if the president is willing to wait to appoint a NHTSA administrator to April. So a lot of moving parts there.
So that may or may not happen, depending on whatever. Like, we don't know what will or won't happen, but, maybe it's an April timeframe. A little disappointing. I'd like things sooner rather than later, always. That's the way Wall Street is, man. We want things quick, not in April. And then let's go to the third thing. The lawyer for who again? The DOT lawyer?
The general counsel for Department of Transportation.
And why is that important? Why is that role important?
Because they're going to implement from a legal perspective. They're going to have an immense amount of say over how the regulatory is interpreted.
So what person needs to be in that position that we would like? Someone that's just really legally smart, someone that's more aggressive? Like what are we looking for as an industry, with autonomy being the bias to have that be a successful appointment?
Somebody with autonomous vehicle and truck experience. Two individuals who I know were offered the role and declined it. Both came from industry. So we're looking for somebody that has autonomous vehicle and or truck experience to fill that role.
Okay, so just experience. So, and when do you think that, and who announces that? Is that announced by the head of the DOT, or is that does the Trump administration say like, okay, you're head of DOT and I'm putting the lawyer in there as well? Like who's in control of making that pick?
I don't know how the political jockeyings work, but in all reality, it should be Congressman Duffy's decision.
So you're pro Duffy.
Very.
So, okay, so then you would think that Duffy's going to put someone in there that has the chops and has the aggression to push this thing forward.
That is correct, as that's how I'm reading the tea leaves today, yes.
And Duffy as a person, meaning they get put in office, like some, agencies operate very quietly and other agencies operate with a lot of noise. Like in my experience, the FCC, Brendan Carr, you're already seeing him be very noisy. How do you expect Duffy to play in this role? And yeah, let's just start with that.
With an immense amount of pride and respect for the institution, I do not expect Duffy to be loud. I expect him to be an operator and to respect the institution and move the ball forward. Duffy, during his confirmation hearing, which I fully expect him to get confirmed, said he wants to usher in the golden age of travel. Mr. Duffy, sir, the golden age of travel starts with autonomy. Let's do it.
So if that's his belief, right? Again, there's two ways to pursue this. You just do it by actions. There's no judgment in that. That's just, how some people do it. Meaning you don't kind of talk about what you're going to do. It just, we wake up 6 months later and boom, something hits. I don't know what hits, how the DOT works. But that's where the national framework comes from. Or he gets confirmed and goes out there and says like, look, we're trying to make autonomy great again, by Grayson's hat. We're trying to get to the national framework. Here's what we want to do. Like start to prime the pump of what his role in that. So which of those two paths do you think he takes based on his personality?
He'll go out and give speeches and talking about the benefits of autonomy to the U.S. economy and the benefits from the safety. And he'll start going around giving a series of speeches. It will not be Brendan Carr on X making comments. It'll be more in a rigorous, more traditional political fashion.
Let's move to the next category. Labor versus tech. You already talked about the head of Teamsters and the relationship that the president has, so we know that. I don't know if that person historically, you would know better, has talked a lot specifically about autonomy. You're nodding yes to our podcast listeners, so he has. Would you agree, however, that people within Trump's circle can say things and not necessarily impact the overall policy? For example, what I started this podcast with is Elon Musk saying very negative things about Stargate, which I think that they should rename Star X just to troll Elon, but I digress. Just because he's saying negative things about Stargate doesn't mean Trump doesn't necessarily do Stargate. Do you acknowledge that? So, and he is vocal as the head of Teamsters, as he should be, representing the people, his members. But, we just have to gauge what the impact is going to be.
The impact right now, from an influence perspective, is pretty tremendous. Mr. O'Brien went on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and he said a lot of nice things about President Trump. And the president heard it, loved it. What we need to happen is we need somebody from Autonomy World to either go on Rogan or to go on Tucker and really explain the benefits of why autonomy is good for the economy, why it's good for the U.S., and why it will create jobs. Because right now, O'Brien's controlling the narrative, and the autonomous vehicle and truck industry is on defense as this gentleman goes out there and touts everything, which I will say is misleading. It's factually incorrect, but it's getting out there and building a narrative where this industry, autonomy, is not out there defending it. Well, we have to, because the president's going to look at it. And then for this industry, the best way to do that, you either go on Tucker, go on Rogan, or go on Fox and Friends. You have to take the message directly to the outlets that the president listens and engages with.
Okay, so outside of someone in the industry, however, who at the federal agencies, would be the counterpart? Or otherwise asked, who is he trying to influence? Is it ultimately going to be go back to DOT and say like, okay, I don't want DOT to do this national framework because it hurts labor? Or is there another path through the agencies that you see that he would influence in order to protect the interests of labor at the cost of maybe autonomy, whether it's national framework or in any fashion?
Mr. O'Brien's going to lobby the White House to put pressure on DOT to squash it. When I say that, though, there is a caveat to that. I want to be very transparent and very clear on this. I do believe that we will get a national framework that does not include trucks weighing over 10,001 pounds. Only vehicles. O'Brien there'll be a compromise. That will go through. The truck part will not go through. However, there's been multiple reports that Elon is lobbying for a framework that includes trucks weighing over 10,001 pounds, because the Tesla Semi will have FSD at some point. So if you look at the political tea leaves, it's really going to be an influence battle between Mr. Musk and Mr. O'Brien. And who wins that, I'm uncertain at this point.
So let's be realistic about this. Of the variety of things that Elon talks about, and there are many, many, many things, do you realistically anticipate that Elon would utter anything about trucking within the next 90 to 120 days?
Yes.
Okay. So that's something to look forward.
Yep.
And we will be carefully watching our Twitter feeds, our X feeds, whatever you want to call it.
What you need to watch for is if Elon starts tweeting out photos of the Semi. If he starts talking about we're now testing FSD on the Semi, that's reading the tea leaves. That's a clear sign that backs this up.
Now, if Elon went after the head of the Teamsters, like he went after Sam Altman and Sam Altman's friend, who he's alleging was on Epstein's island, what do you think the reaction would be on the Teamsters if he did something like that to make his point?
Teamsters would try and go scorched earth, but you have to remember Tesla's not a union shop. They've already tried. So Elon has experience fighting labor, organized labor. And Mr. Musk is not afraid to fight back.
That would be probably a more interesting battle than what we've seen with Altman. Let's go to the third major category that we need to look for: U.S. versus China. TikTok is, I guess our kids are using it, but I looked in the App Store; it's still not working. I try and Rich, my partner at Lightshed, tries to parse these statements. He thinks they're going to be fine. I don't know. It seems like Trump wants this kind of magic deal to make it happen. That's kind of the big one. But then we talked about tariffs, 10%, whatever it is. I don't know whether it's coming February 1st or not, but certainly investors, you haven't seen Trump talk about this aggressively in the first couple of days. I think it's kind of lingering in the background, and it can still come, but maybe more of a negotiating ploy. Obviously, China is a big issue in autonomy as it relates to the cars or even parts. I think we talked in the last episode about, some of the sensors, whether that generates an upgrade cycle. Your big thing, obviously, is Zeekr and the unforced error. First, let's talk about who are we watching there within government that I think would affect, and whose statements that would affect or give us some inkling about which way this China versus U.S. battle is going to shape up.
It's going to define the global stage. President Trump has made comments that he wants to visit China. It's all going to come down to Trump, and then we need to watch messages coming out of Secretary of State Rubio, to be Treasury Secretary Bessent. We need to watch statements from Treasury and State in the White House. Those are the three big things that we're watching as it relates to China.
Commerce maybe also.
Yeah, but how long does Howard last? That's a question that I've heard rumblings about, because there was a public fight, and it was reported in Bloomberg, CNBC, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, about how Howard Lutnick, he tried to get Treasury, and Scott Bessent outmaneuvered him politically and got it, and this was a consolidation prize at Commerce. The question is, how long does he stay at Commerce, and what actions is he going to do? But I do believe at the end of the day, the China policy is going to be set by President Trump in the White House.
So I have an answer for that, which is, like I said last week, it's a different vibe now versus 8 years ago, more organized, hit the ground running, but it's still Trump. And, literally on the inauguration stage sat Vivek, who was literally getting kicked out at the same time. So we still have a management style that has high turnover. So I think, who knows? And all these people obviously could change. So obviously the one answer on each of these three topics, aside from the additional players that we're watching, which could change, is just what Trump says, and then how that may or may not change, over the next weeks, months, years, whatever it is.
Did you notice behind the president, very interesting maneuver as it relates to autonomy? Sundar Pichai, CEO of Alphabet and Google, was there. Sergey Brin was there as well. That's a big move. That's a very big move.
The big thing for Google as it relates to us, obviously there's bigger issues that Google is dealing with in terms of the DOJ and the amount of money that they're paying Apple to be the default search engine. But it's obviously the Zeekr car. So, those that paid their tributes and were placed, I think Trump got more out of that than they did, frankly. It was a great backdrop. Everyone, I saw all these tweets about people saying, like, oh my God, the cabinet's behind them. Like, that's, you're basically showing that the leaders of our economy are there standing behind you. That, that was a purposeful, and I think in Trump's mind, and it's probably true, beneficial impact to him to have them there, as opposed to like some cabinet member that most Americans probably wouldn't even recognize anyway, sadly.
It sent unity. It's very, you're right about that. It sent unity, and it also said job creation. Those individuals behind him are responsible for creating millions and millions of jobs. President Trump sent a jobs message on that.
But with Sundar there, what does this mean for Zeekr, my friend? One of your favorite topics.
I don't know. I don't see a path forward for Zeekr. I've said it many times. I still believe it was an unforced error. I don't see a path forward. But unless Trump puts on his deal hat and says, okay, you want the Zeekr? America's going to own 50% of it. Does he pull the same deal he's trying to pull with TikTok? There's going to be a negotiation.
Why not? I mean, we'll see how TikTok goes. And if you own 50%, but the tech is still in China, or what if China basically says, let us buy a bunch of NVIDIA chips? Can you rule out that this president wouldn't do that if there's some other deal that brings jobs into this country, like some swap? I don't think I could, and like discount that. Like, I think anything's on the table. There are no sacred cows from what I can tell.
He's going to make a deal. He's going to make lots of deals. What happens to Zeekr? I don't know. I still say it's an unforced error, but it was a mistake at Waymo. Did not read the room. They did not read the tea leaves. They did not read the geopolitical environment well. Perhaps that's because they're stuck in the bubble of Silicon Valley and not have a real understanding of what most Americans think. And you look at reading the tea leaves. There's a lot of things that people do that are right. A lot of things people do that are wrong. And generally, most people can read the tea leaves. But there was a report in Bloomberg this morning that this is a Beijing-based Chinese autonomous trucking company called Inceptio Technology, is looking to IPO in New York to raise 100 to 200 million. I'm baffled. I don't know what to say.
We have WeRide and Pony, so added to the list. Being in the U.S., listed in the U.S., obviously is important for people to have. If you want our breakdown of WeRide, I forget what episode. I think that's probably around episode 6 or 7, maybe, where I talked about some of the stuff I thought about WeRide. So, I mean, IPOing in this country is not like the technology coming in this country, Grayson. So, if the markets are conducive to it, and like I've said before, you want capital to being successfully raised in the space. That's why sometimes, we talk to companies like, oh, this company's so bad and they're going to fail. I'm like, dude, you don't want autonomy IPOs to fail because it just puts a bigger stink on the space. You want the space to be desirous. So if you have some negative viewpoint of Inceptio or of WeRide or whatever, and they get valued at, Z billion dollars, then, that's ultimately going to be positive for you. I mean, you could talk about Aurora's valuation at whatever it is, 8, 10, 11 billion dollars. And if you're a trucking company and you're looking at your, whether you should be in autonomy or not, and what your overall company is valued at and how you can increase value over time by being in technology, those comparisons are made by analysts every day. That's why, not to kind of go on a tangent here, it's just still comes back to I'm not sure what the hell GM was thinking about in killing Cruise, but whatever. So the bottom line is, Grayson, let's embrace any new IPO. I hope it is successful, and there's a lot of people out there that want to buy this thing.
But will the investor demand be there for a Chinese autonomous trucking company where we do not have clear, variable insights into the state of the tech, into how it's operating?
In the case of We Ride and Pony, it's just a matter of the float, right? Even if you care about the space as an investor, the investors that I believe matter in the institutional world, they couldn't buy enough of the company if they wanted to, right? So what you end up getting is smaller investors or retail investors buying it. That doesn't give good signal, as the California people like to say, about whether there's a tremendous amount of financing available in the community. It's a good kind of sign. Like, it's nice to have a ticker on your screen, and you look at the year to date, and it's like, you'd rather have it plus 20% than negative 20% to give kind of a visible affirmation of the space. But with the float of these companies being so small, the float, for some of our podcast listeners don't know, it's like what is tradable in the market as opposed to the shares that are locked up. If I can't buy $15 or $20 million worth of stock in a given day, I'm not going to mess around with it. Why? Because if I let's say I spent 3 weeks buying a position and all of a sudden I want to get out and there's no liquidity to get out, I'm not selling it at $20. I'm selling it at $5, right? It's just a matter of the liquidity. And that's not how most investors would want to operate. So that's ultimately, I think, the problem. We'll see. I don't know. I haven't seen the filing. We'll see. Maybe their float's bigger and it's a different situation in this case.
But only going for 100 to 200, that's a small raise.
There's the opposite from, rather than talking about float, the bigger issue is like, where does that really get you? And, there's different CEOs that we've spoken with that, some like, oh my God, if you're spending $3 billion and you're doing it wrong. And the other guy's like, oh, if you're only spending $300 million, there's no way you're going to get it done. So there's like always going to be someone that said that. I mean, Massa, getting back to Massa, when he was owning Sprint, he's like, he cut 80% of the budget. And he's like, oh yeah, next year he's going to wave his magic hands. We're going to have the best wireless network in the US. Spoiler alert, it never came out of last place as the worst network in the US. And when they cut CapEx, it only got worse. So you can say what you want. And by the way, on the flip side, spending for the sake of spending doesn't necessarily mean you get the best product. And I think Elon has shown that time and time again. And the obvious example being X, where everyone thought that service was going to crash when he cut 80% of the people there. So let's reserve judgment, but let's hope for the best that there are some investors that care, but no real institutional investors, I don't think at this point, really going to spend that much time on it.
No, but when we get the filing, we'll read it and we'll talk about it.
Grayson, let's stop talking about $200 million raises and let's talk about big companies that matter in the space, Uber being one of them. And, this week over in Davos, where all the elites get together, they fly their private jets, they go over there, they talk about a lot of different things. But Dara, the CEO of Uber, was interviewed by Andrew Ross Sorkin, and he said he believes that the technology that enables autonomous vehicles will, quote, be ready for prime time between now and 2 years from now. However, there was a quick caveat to that. But as far as commercialization, that's like a decade away. So there was like hey, I'm admitting my problem, but it's not really going to be a problem in terms of commercialization for 10 years. So it was kind of he basically spoke out of both sides of the mouth, right? I mean, he's like, you can't accuse me of like, because my example of this, going back to Telco Corner, is like the cable companies that called fixed wireless cell phone internet and stuck their heads in the sand and made themselves look like idiots to investors, as that cell phone internet had them losing customers and had their stocks get re-rated to be telcos. I think Dara, what he's trying to do here is be like, look, I realize I'm not going to deny that autonomy is a thing, and it's a thing that's going to happen in 2 years. But by the way, it's not going to really be commercial for a decade, right? That's having your cake and eating it too, is it not?
Yes, and if you looked at and watched the whole interview, he went on and talked about the Uber platform is going to give customers in demand. So he leaned in again to the platform aspect. But the pushback to that is Waymo doesn't need it to get demand. We see the filings that they do every quarter. They're growing. So So is the platform narrative, is that going to be the new talking point from Uber?
Of course it is. It's not the new talking point, it's the existing talking point, and it will come back up again on their website. I think they're doing the best they can in terms of not only communicating, but also in strategy. Like, you can only do the best that you can. And I think, look, from a parallel path, they're kind of get out of jail free card. I think they need to go back to what can they utilize the app for in terms of being the super app, which, by the way, is something that Elon, like, if you go back to the the early X.com days, and what became into PayPal, that was also going to be the super app. So I think there's still that kind of opportunity for them. And in the meantime, they're going to have to just do what they do. And look, on past episodes, we've thrown out several predictions of potential new partnerships that we think Uber will possibly announce over the next 6 to 9 months.
And then also in the interview, Mr. Khosrowshahi said over the next 10 years, he expects the majority of the rides to be human. And then after that, he hinted towards autonomy. Is it waiting for the wave tech to catch up? And then they're going to start operating a fleet? And if so, what point, and this is prediction for you, what point in history, and I'm holding you to a date here, do you see over 50% of the rides on the Uber platform being autonomous?
Autonomous. Oh, I'm not prepared to make that prediction right now, Grayson. I'm going to be more thoughtful about it. I think it's going to be. I'm going to take the under on 10 years. I'm going to chicken out and say the under on 10 years. But I will say that if I was asking the questions, great respect for Andrew Ross Sorkin, when he said 10 years you'd be on autonomy, then the question should have been like, okay, well then what happens to Uber in years 10 to 20? And if we're buying your company, are we buying an annuity of cash flows that's going to continue to grow or maintain, or is it going to start declining in 10 years? And as a result, what multiple and valuation should I put in your company? If you're acknowledging that, even whether it's 10 years or 15 or 20, and then we can debate like, okay, if we agree that at that time it goes down, it impacts the valuation, then what if 10 is 8 and 7? And then you start factoring in what I would call the time value of money in terms of when that free cash flow or that future free cash flow gets impacted. And that is precisely why what I call story stocks, not that Uber is one, because Uber is generating free cash flow. You can get a free cash flow multiple. But that is precisely how growth stocks are valued. It's not what's happening next quarter. I've said this before in this podcast. When you hear people on Twitter or on YouTube, they go, oh, this happened in the quarter, like, okay, but that's not how investor money works. They're trying to figure out where is that cash flow going to be in the future. They're buying that future growth today, and that's how you get higher valuation. So that was an opportunity to ask that question. I'm sure Dara had a great answer for it anyway, but that ends up being the issue.
We have a lot of listeners and viewers from Uber, and also those listeners and viewers, we'd love to have Dara on the show. We'd love to ask him these questions.
By the way, of all the people, he would not be afraid at all. That dude is very smooth, smart, all respect to how he could handle himself with tough questions. But sometimes questioners just don't ask them.
And to make this even better for Uber, since Mr. Khosrowshahi is now living in New York, wall space there, I'll come up on the Trump Express and we'll do it in person in New York with Mr. Khosrowshahi. So Uber, reach out. You know how to get a hold of us.
By the way, before we move to the next topic, on the topic of people not asking tough questions, I am carefully relying on Twitter, to now call it X, to provide me with early data points of how Tesla is performing, right? Because I got the 12, 6, 7, whatever it is, which is working fine. I want to know 13, which requires hardware 4. So, there was a site that I follow. I think he's great, does great job. Holmar's blog. I think you may know the person behind it. He just showed his Tesla getting off the highway on aggressive mode, hurry mode, whatever it is. And the car, you can see the car go from 2 lanes over and just about get in to the exit. And the comments there underneath that, oh my God, this is great. Look how awesome it is. Like, no, that's not awesome. Like, that is not what is going to get you to approval. Like, so it's just Grayson, I think, you've been accused of being a Tesla stan, someone that, just supports them blindly, but like, it's just kind of crazy. It's fine for it to do that. And I'm sure that there's adjustments that can be made, but you have to be able to look through it with an objective lens and say, like, That is not good car performance because it made the exit by cutting over 2 lanes. That is not what is going to move the industry forward, you know, and get to the national framework and all the things that we've discussed for 20 episodes.
That's Florida driver behavior. Florida on 95's got some of the worst drivers.
Oh, by the way, let's be clear that driving is better than any human, but that's not the issue. Like, autonomy is going to be held to a higher standard, and like, even I will acknowledge, like okay, it doesn't have to be necessarily 100%, but like going from 2 lanes over, that's not good. And I just don't understand, like, the mentality. Is the mentality just like, I love Tesla and Elon so much that no matter what you show me in my brain, that's going to be a positive thing? How does that work?
Some people are interesting people.
Okay, so you get your rants, I get mine from time to time. But now we can move on to the next topic.
No, you do great on it. You're right. There's a lot of concerns, and it is a risk. At some point, they'll fix it. I'm not worried about that. And I've said this many times that Tesla will crack full self-driving. It's just a matter of time. But you're right. It's going to be held to a higher standard. And maneuvers like that are not necessarily the best maneuvers.
Yeah, and the appropriate response is like, yikes, that's a little aggro, but you know, that'll probably get done in the next thing. It's not like, yeah, that was great. Like, no, that wasn't great.
It's not, we're not playing Mario Kart, we're not playing a video game. And that's that. And if you look at that video, you look at it from an insurance perspective, oh, that's a risk. We've got to jack up your insurance rates because that could be a pretty big risk there. You look at insurance, it goes one way, goes up. And what happens when it goes up? They don't want to pay claims. And unfortunately, everybody's insurance in this country is going to go up because of the unfortunate fires in California. There's no way around it. I'm very sorry to say it. And this will blow your mind. 42% of an Uber fare in LA goes to mandated commercial insurance for TNC trips. 42%. It goes any higher, who's going to take an Uber? To me, that's a risk to Uber's business because people aren't going to want to pay.
I am very familiar with this number. It's unfortunate that this doesn't seem like a top priority of the administration. Just point to all the billboards that I see of trial lawyers. There's a lot of money that a lot of people are getting paid. It's unfortunate. On the flip side, I'm familiar with it because I'm also aware of how a fleet, even without being autonomous, just with drivers, like, actual trained safety drivers in a real car, can secure lower insurance rates than what Uber, with all of its scale, is effectively, tagging in or allocating into that fare in Los Angeles. So if you take that to the next step and say, okay, the fleets are already lowering that cost. And that's why I think Uber, by the way, will get to, talk about 50%, get to 50% of rides being on fleets, not individual independent drivers, but on fleets within 5 years. That put me down for that prediction. But then when you layer in autonomy on top of that, whether with that driver, a safety driver, or without, that makes it even safer, then those insurance rates are obviously going to go down further. And as they go down, price goes down. And to the extent there's a price sensitive market, there's a reason to get rid of that second or third car that you may own and just use the autonomous cars or the fleet cars because it's cheaper, because insurance, which is 42% of the bill. So let's say you cut that in half, you have a 20% cut on that alone, let alone what autonomy is saving you on labor costs. Like, it opens up the market opportunity.
Uber needs autonomy. They really, truly need autonomy because these insurance costs are unstable. Where does all that insurance money go? It's government mandated. Where does it go? We need Elon to do a Doge on it. Where's it go?
To personal injury lawyers. That's where it goes. To pay out nuclear verdicts.
And that's why we need tort reform. The United States needs tort reform.
Preaching to the choir, brother. But we'll see.
I preach to the choir, and certain people, they write these analyst reports. I know I'm not beating up on your industry, but I read some of these things and I go wacky doodle. These things are a little.
You're gonna condemn all analysts now? What happened this time? Who said what?
Now, you're a great analyst. I want to put that out, and I got to give a shout out. I love your partner Rich's media work. It's fantastic. So Rich does a great job, and we got a retweet from Rich last week. I want to know what we did wrong or what we did right.
Exactly.
So Morgan Stanley comes out with one of their off the wall papers, and this is, I don't even know why they said this. This is not even common sense. This is just plain simple. They're projecting that Waymo's going to add 3 cities in 2026, Miami and 2 others. 4 in 2027, 5 in 2028, 6 in 2029, 7 in 2030. I feel like we're back in kindergarten. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well, when you fill right in Excel, it always adds one by default. So I think that's what happens. I mean, look, Grayson, we do these earnings. One of our products is we look at all the TMT earnings cards and we rate which companies say great quarter guys on the call. Morgan Stanley is oftentimes on that list of getting on conference calls and saying great quarter. I think, on Tesla, didn't they reduce the robo-taxi? I saw this, I think, somewhere on Twitter. You just kind of come up with some other area. AI is going to generate value here, so we'll tweak down our robo-taxi numbers there, and it all kinds of adds up to a big number. I don't know. You got to put numbers down, so good for them for putting cities down.
But they didn't name cities. They didn't go out and make a prediction.
Right. To me, the New York is obviously the big one. And look, I don't know where I was seeing this. It was like I forget, it was some media channel, but they were talking about snow and, again, saying like, it was a podcast I was listening to. It was probably one of the, Downtown Josh Brown podcasts where they were saying, how is it going to work in the snow? And I'm like, okay, there you go. Like, let's get it up in a market working in the snow in New York, to get people, again, more comfortable with the technology. New York's obviously a priority, so I'm not going to beat that horse again. Hopefully we can get there quickly.
Okay, so I agree with you on New York. Now, I got to poke the bear a little. Will Waymo be subject to congestion pricing?
Yeah, I mean, everyone should be subjected to congestion pricing, but the upside is I think it has reduced downtown traffic, so their ability to operate and get to complete more rides faster will offset whatever those incremental charges are. But if they just keep the cars down there circling around there all the time, then they should be good to go.
Good to go. I will make a prediction that one of the upcoming cities will be Nashville. I'm basing that off of the economic growth of the city and the population movement there and just the general ability and from a regulatory standpoint. So I believe one of the next cities will be Nashville. Don't know when.
And by the way, not for nothing, but you get snow everywhere now, right? You get snow down in Florida, you get snow in New Orleans. So, we'll have to figure this out. I don't know. Did any of those cars go out?
It's funny you said that. I had dinner with a gentleman last night. He got snowed in. We're in South Florida. He couldn't get back up to North Florida. He got snowed in because the highway was closed. And so there was a great meme that went up. It said, Trump solved climate change on day one. It's snowing in Florida. But the transparency's back. We don't know day or night what we're going to get. We're going to get a truth post. We're going to get an off-the-cuff remark. But we know we're going to be here each and every week covering the autonomy markets. Next week, earnings. What do we need to look for, Walt?
Well, we have the telcos, but Apple and Tesla are both reporting. So, Apple, the stock has finally started to come in. And if you listen to me on Lightshed, we've talked a lot about our disbelief in this kind of super cycle that's been pushed by other quote unquote analysts. They get a lot of playtime. So that's, I think, getting discounted in the stock. I mean, maybe if finally Apple is not given the benefit of the doubt, as it has been for, quite some time, does management, or maybe there's even changeover in management that occurs. Very stale management team. I think definitely needs a refresh there in many of the different segments. But do they reconsider whether they need to be in autonomy or not? And I think that probably, I wouldn't be shocked if that's a topic that someone kind of gets on the soapbox and says like, oh my God, Apple has no growth, no innovation. Why can't they do something in autonomy? What are the companies that they can buy? And, maybe there's someone in trucking that can revitalize them and use the technology into cars or whatever it is, like that you may hear, maybe not this quarter, but that may be a topic. And then obviously Tesla reports. So we're going to want to know more about what's going on in Tesla. Do you think anyone on the call will ask Elon about the alleged wheel that was in a cyber taxi? What do you think? Did you see a wheel there, or was that a...
It looked to me like a seatbelt.
I think you're right. I think you're right. So big week earnings-wise for autonomy. So we're looking forward to it.
Apple needs a growth story. The Vision Pro bombed. Let's just call it for what it is. It bombed. The super cycle, you correctly called it. When I think you're one of the only, if not the only analyst to go against the grain. Apple Intelligence doesn't work very well. Siri doesn't work very well. Nobody really talks about it. And Apple, they missed the boat. That's why they had to do that deal with OpenAI. And then meanwhile, Google had its ups and downs with AI, but Gemini's coming on strong. The DeepMind team, they're continuing to innovate around AI, when Apple just kind of sits up.
But the deal with Apple, OpenAI, has done nothing. Like, Like, how often do you use OpenAI through the Siri? Siri is so bad, continues to be so bad. No one's using it. So how is it directing any traffic to OpenAI? So that hasn't done anything for them other than a press release. And frankly, all they've ever had, which propped the stock up for 6 months, was a press release from WWDC saying that they're going to do AI. That's all it's been, a press release. No deliverables of note. In fact, people are complaining now about the photos. Not even saying that it's not even better, but it's like worse that they don't know no one knows how to navigate their photos. This is like new Coke, man. Give me my old Coke back.
Apple's lost. There's no clear innovations. And I said this, and we've said this on past pods, and I've said this privately and publicly. Walking away from Project Titan was a mistake. You wanted to put all this money into the Vision Pro. Walking away from Project Titan was a mistake.
So people, like, when things are going well, analysts ask easy questions. When things aren't going well, they actually have to show some level of backbone. So I'm not saying that they're going to chunk the quarter that badly, but at some point, if the stock continues to underperform, someone's going to be like, they're going to ask all the regular bullshit, softball questions, Morgan Stanley, great quarter, whatever it is. And then someone will finally say, like, hey, you seem to have a growth problem. Is it possible to revive Project Titan? Or what do you have? You're spending more on R&D than you ever have before. What do you have to show for it? What new product categories are possible? And, that pressure increases. And I think I'm old enough, man. I've seen enough cycles where there are CEOs, like, there's love and then there's not love. And I liken this to my football. People hated Sirianni at the start of the year, game 3, get him, fire him. Now we're playing for an opportunity to play in the Super Bowl.
We're going to be monitoring any comments around Project Titan. If they do, Apple's going to have to figure it out. You can only buy back stock for so long. You got to innovate. And I got to give a lot of credit. You cover this on Lightshed. Rich does a really great job. Meta. Zuckerberg just keeps leaning in and building things. There was a report yesterday they're going to build these high-end Oakley wearables. He keeps leaning in and building the future. Yes, did he bet big on the metaverse? Yes. The metaverse, cool? Yes. But he just continues to build where Apple doesn't. That's the big takeaway from that. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is building and scaling autonomy. Walt, until next week.